The thoughts, views, expressions, and opinions of this podcast, as well as its hosts, are for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We simply want to encourage, shed insight, empower, equip, and inspire those who listen. We are not trained professionals or claim to be. It does not constitute or take place of actual advice from your doctor or therapist. We hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
I mean, that'd be awesome if you could do that.
We can use this as an outtake.
An outtake and a clip.
And a clip.
I hope that there's I'm not.
Feast your eyes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Have you guys heard about that comedian Shane Gillis?
Yes,
bro.
Yes.
So he had me dying, bro. He has a great way of.
When he says to wheel out Donald Trump.
Yeah,
they're both gay.
Yeah, it's so hilarious, bro.
Wow, they're gay. I said, wow, they're gay.
Dude, I think I have that clip right now. This is so funny.
Instead of 0 Dark 30 killing these guys, we should break in and have our special forces fucking whack them off in their own bed.
Yeah.
A live military operation. He's the only dude in the room that wasn't military. He must have been the only dude watching it that was like, oh! Right? You could tell he's never seen it before by the fucking speech. The speech sounded like a guy just trying to tell you some shit he saw. A lot of guys would knock on the front door, not these guys, not our guys. Our guys went through the wall, they blew up his wall. And they used dogs. Beautiful dogs. Beautiful dogs is the funniest detail. It's true. They actually did use it. Was the Army Rangers, and they used dogs because they were afraid al-Baghdadi was going to be wearing a suicide vest, so they killed him with dogs and a robot. And then made fun of him for crying. Let that guy cry. That's the scariest death I've ever heard of. That dude was laying in his bed in the middle of the night, his wall exploded. Fucking 10 dogs and a robot. Dude, 10 dogs wearing helmets and goggles broke into his house. The Paw Patrol, the actual Paw Patrol. You guys have been so great.
The actual Paw Patrol. I love that guy.
Hilarious.
He's so funny, man. But I watched his entire Netflix special. Oh my gosh, it was hilarious, bro. But here we are, another episode of the Kingdom Podcast. I am here with two of my dearest friends, Douglas. Was it 10 years now?
I actually was just thinking about this on the ride over here. January. I met you in January of 2014.
I thought it was 2013.
No. Then that would have been 10 years last January. Yeah.
Wow.
I went to your 31st birthday.
I thought it was my 30th, but okay.
No, you were
We're going to blow a horn for that. But I still have that music on. I don't know why. This is the last time.
You have an open YouTube tab or something? Maybe
no, it's an
iTunes playing.
It's right? What happens when you let your cousin borrow your, and they go crazy on the iTunes. But anyway, I just want to make sure that my levels are okay, which is good. Everybody's levels is okay. We got Doug, we got Gabe. They're no stranger to the podcast. But if you are a stranger to the podcast over there in YouTube world, my name is Javi. This is Douglas. This is Gabe. And I'm the host of Kingdom Talks. If you haven't subscribed, shared, or done any of that good stuff, go ahead and smash that like, that share button, and subscribe. What are you doing if you're not? What are you doing with your life, right, guys? What are you doing with your lives? But yeah, we look like we are good with the levels. The levels look really good. And Tyler's here in spirit. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here to run the camera, run the lights, but we're going to do our best to have a great conversation. I got a lot of topics. I got a lot of reactions that I want to react to with you guys. But before we do, let's just break the ice a little bit as we did with listening to Shane Gillis. How's everybody doing? How is everybody doing in this Christmas season?
I'm doing very well. Christmas is just an absolute wonderful time of the year.
Are you being sarcastic?
No. Like I love Christmas.
Because I'm not there with you. I'm
really?
So stressed. I'm ready for this thing to end.
Oh my gosh.
What about you?
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. I saved up PTO.
Let me get your because it's covering your face, and I don't want YouTube fans to not see your face because you're beautiful.
Good.
You're a beautiful
I'm married though, so
Lebanese man.
But yeah, no. So, dude, I saved up my PTO for next week.
Nice.
I'm gonna take the week off because we already have the Monday and the next Monday off.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to having a week of doing nothing.
Nice.
Except that I just learned I have to take care of Kristen's friend's cat.
Oh.
Plural. So I guess I'm
somewhat allergic to cats. I think you're full blown.
I'm very allergic. I could never live in a house with cats.
I love cats.
Yeah, he's full blown allergic to cats. I'm sorta in the middle. Like I can be in a room as long as the cat's like not by me or in another room.
Yeah.
But I can't have it like all up on me because then I'll start kind of.
My cat will literally sleep underneath my arm.
That's nice.
And whenever I move at night, she will back away, wait for me to settle down, and then curl back under whatever side my face.
So you're a cat man.
I'm a cat man.
Wow.
I like dogs if they're well trained.
I'm going to question your salvation on that then. If you're into cats.
Well, we technically have 3 dogs and 2 cats.
3 dogs and 2 cats. Okay.
So Kristen has a German Shepherd, a Maltipoo, and a Basenji Terrier. And a cat that she brought into the marriage. And then while we were engaged, I decided I've never been able to choose my own pet growing up since my goldfish back when I was 3.
Right.
And so I chose a cat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And her name is Nami, and she's gray and white, and she's adorable and wildly intelligent.
Wow. I didn't think that I would ever get into cats. And in the beginning, when I was like a kid, I guess I got into cats because I thought they were baby lions and tigers. But then as soon as I found out that wasn't the case, I'm like, oh, cats are weird.
Are you kidding me? Well, they are nature's perfect killing machines. So check this out. Not only do they have like heightened reflexes, heightened senses that are more potent than like a dog's sense of smell.
Right.
And
their reflexes are crazy.
Yeah,
they're faster
ridiculous.
than like a snake.
Dude,
they could literally avoid a snake's
exactly. They can like jump 7 feet in the air, straight from just sitting.
Straight vertical, yeah.
Here's another crazy adaptation that they've developed. So cats have a parasite in their fecal matter that if rodents come into contact with the fecal matter and like touch it or ingest it or whatever, the parasite will change the rodent's brain so that the rodent is no longer afraid of cats.
That's crazy.
Making the rodent easier to catch and be eaten so that the parasite can then continue to propagate.
Now you know why I don't like cats, because they're satanic.
I think that's ingenious.
Full-blown Satanism.
Dude, that's like my crap is getting me free food? Like, that's amazing.
Wow, that's crazy, but that's insane. What about you, Doug? How you doing? How's everything? How's your mental health? How's everything?
Oh, well, pretty good, man. Good? No, I couldn't be happier, man.
You're the happy guy in the group. And meanwhile, I'm over here struggling and bleeding.
Oh, no. Christmas just makes me so happy. I just watch Christmas movies immediately, starting from the night of Thanksgiving ending. I'm watching Christmas movies. I'm decorating. Yeah. I'm listening to Christmas music, baking Christmas cookies. I absolutely love it.
You're the happiest man ever.
I
envy you.
I love Christmas.
I'm over here
wrapping gifts,
watching the world burn. And trying to come up with an apocalyptic strategy out of here. No, I'm kidding. Speaking of Christmas, like real quick before we get into like serious brass tack stuff. Yeah. Top Christmas movies of all time for you. Real quick.
Top Christmas movies.
If you had to go top 3.
Okay, top 3. So I love the Johnathan Taylor Thomas I'll Be Home for Christmas.
Nice.
That's something that I've watched.
Wow, that's a throwback.
1998 is when it came out.
Yeah.
On some newer stuff, there's actually, believe it or not, there's an animated movie called Klaus. The best animated Christmas movie I've ever seen. I think that came out in 2019.
Okay. Yeah.
Very good. I recommend anybody watch it. Like even though even if you don't have kids, watch it. It's very good. Right. And what would I give a nice third? I actually just watched a movie called Candy Cane Lane. That's a brand new one that was released this year.
Candy Cane Lane?
It was just released this year on Prime. I believe it was a Prime original.
Okay.
It was excellent movie.
Okay, my top 3 real quick. Home Alone. Both, and I'm going to put Home Alone 1 and 2, A1, AB. Yeah. And then the second one is Elf. My third is The Grinch.
I like
Which Grinch? Live action?
Jim Carrey.
Very good.
Which I heard there's a rumor report, and it hasn't been confirmed by TMZ or any of the big platforms, but there's a rumor report in smaller platforms that they are in talks to trying to pitch an idea of Jim Carrey coming back for a Grinch Part 2.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Like a continuation.
Possibly a continuation or a spin-off to The Grinch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So for me, I've got Die Hard,
Of course you were going to say Die Hard.
Home Alone, and then for third, it's tied between Elf and The Grinch.
Elf and The Grinch. Yeah, I mean, Will Ferrell, bro, I think he's the funniest guy in our generation. From the...
Back when they could make comedies?
Yeah, I mean, the Saturday Night Live, like, even the Saturday Night Live outtakes, like, if you go in the rabbit hole and you find, like, because it's out there in the internet.
Bro, Night at the Roxbury?
Night of the Roxbury, the bloopers, like, on just pure reels of bloopers that Will Ferrell has ever been a part of, it's hilarious.
I saw this one
Talladega Nights. Oh my gosh!
my goodness.
I saw this one bunch of clips where it's like
Yeah.
a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old,
Yeah.
and like they're giving her words to say, and then
Yeah.
he's acting to them, and
Right.
she's like, "Give me your money, or I'll kill you," and he's like, "No, don't do that." And
Oh
it's
my
just like
God.
him overacting to
Yeah,
her,
yeah.
just little she just says phrases.
Yeah.
I thought it was the funniest thing I'd seen in a long time.
Hilarious. Yeah. I wanted to talk about a little bit of what's trending and what's in the news cycle right now. Johnathan Majors. I don't know if you guys are DC or Marvel guys, but Johnathan Majors has been on an ongoing investigation, ongoing litigation process because he's been called out by his now ex-girlfriend. I don't think they're together now. But she was accusing him of misconduct, assault. I don't know if it was the sexual kind, but definitely assault. And battery, and this was literally at his peak of his ascension because he did Creed 3. He's done other movies outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was in Ant-Man in Marvel. He was in the Loki series as a villain / anti-villain in that series, which was a great series, by the way, if you guys are into the Disney Plus Marvel series. And he was set to have his standalone movie as the main villain for the Avenger Phase 5, Phase 6 stuff that's going on in Marvel with Fantastic Four coming out and Johnathan Majors. Last night, it was trending via X, via all social media platforms that Marvel, because of his conviction or his sentencing, that he was found guilty of not all 8 charges, but 2 of the charges. I think I have the...
So he was actually found guilty. These are no longer accusations?
This is no longer accusations, but here's the kicker, and this is what I want to talk about because this is kind of like where society is at today. Okay. Where I come from, and I'm old enough to remember that when you're in the mercy of the judge and in court, in the mercies of the people around you by the jury, you would have to be presented overwhelming, by no shadow of a doubt, overwhelming evidence that said accusations are to be true.
Right. And
a lot of people, including myself, don't believe that there was overwhelming evidence because I've been kind of following this since it began. I was following this because I'm a huge Marvel guy. I love Marvel. For those that don't know, and those that do know me, know that I'm a huge Marvel guy. I collected comic books when I was a kid. I'm old enough to remember that I collected the cards. They were like baseball cards to me. So I'm really into that comic book geek culture. So I'm a geek, in the closet geek. All right?
I'm out of the closet. I'm just angry at Marvel right now.
So yeah, exactly. But in the justice system, who I know that it's not perfect. Doug's knows, you're pretty much in the middle of the justice system here in America. It's not the perfect thing, but
right. Well, my whole thing when we talk about the justice system, I think we have a good system. I think that we could make some tweaks to it.
Right.
My whole thought on is what's the alternative?
Right.
If it's not a jury of your peers, do you want a government official deciding your fate?
Right.
Do you want, it gets very dicey at a certain point.
It does.
So I think there's adjustments. I would say our foundation is good. I do think it needs to be regulated a little bit more, just with the fact that, you look at, it's if you can convince 12 people through public pressure to essentially vote a certain way, because that's what you're doing in a jury, voting through public pressure, whether it be rioting or people following you home or whatever it is, because not all juries are sequestered. You look at things like that, it's like, well, then, if you have a big enough public opinion and public pressure, it's like, well, you can pretty much convict anybody of anything.
And you can sway a jury depending on how big or polarizing you are. So if it's a Hollywood star or an entertainer or a sports athlete or even a mobster like John Gotti once upon a time swayed a jury through corruption and blackmail. John Gotti was known to blackmail a juror to win his early cases that he had while he was in power of the Gambino crime family. But where do we draw the line as far as influence and when it's like a Johnathan Majors in the stand and you have 12 jurors who may have presuppositions about you because of who you are, where you come from, the movies that you've made, the movies that bombed, like this is all in the psyche of 12 jurors that we don't know that were properly vetted, because that could also be in question, right? So with me, I think he got dealt the short end of the stick because it's pretty much protocol that when you're involved in a domestic issue here in America and you're a black male in America and you're a Hollywood star in ascension to superstardom, and then you get involved with a white woman and she's screaming and hollering that he's battered me, and there's no overwhelming evidence that he was the agitator, is kind of rubs people the wrong way. And now the MCU, Marvel, and Kevin, what's his last name?
Feige.
Kevin Feige said, okay, we're going to part ways from this guy because we can't associate ourselves with this guy because of our image, which is kind of ironic, being that they're a Disney property now, and we can jump in that rabbit hole if you want, but Disney's been doing some questionable things when it comes to catering to the youth and family and the nuclear family and stuff like that. But back to Johnathan Majors and what he was dealt with. There was video prior to his sentencing, prior to his jury trial, prior to all of this happening. It was quote unquote leaked. Videos from all corners of the city, because this took place in New York City, that showed that she got out of the vehicle. They were having an altercation. They were essentially having what we call a shout bout, and she got on him. He then wanted to press back and avoid getting hit. Then he started fleeing and she started chasing him. And every angle and every block and every 3-block radius that every camera in New York City, by the way, has cameras all over, if you didn't know. And that was presented in court. And the fact that 2 out of the 8 charges were filed and as convictions because of they found there was reasonable doubt that, hey, he shouldn't have been where he was, he shouldn't have put himself in that situation, so on and so forth. And now you're looking at possibly 1 year in jail, which he probably is not going to do because of who he is and what he's doing in the litigation process. However, with people talking about, okay, well, if he didn't say these things that he said on the text, because there was also leaked text and they were screenshotted and they saw the kind of text that he was having. Clearly, they show what I got out of it is like, clearly this man is not all on the right, and neither is the woman. They're kind of involved in what they call nowadays a toxic relationship, right? His text messaging the verbiage is very abrasive because it's been leaked. It's Googleable if you guys want to Google fact check me. But these screenshots were leaked, and yes, they were very abrasive. Could have they been taken out of context? Perhaps, but they were very abrasive, very egotistical.
Let me ask you: was there anything that was like threatening her life or liberty in the text? Because I haven't read the text.
Right. No, from what I've read, it was just a lot of bravado. You're a piece of
Right. No. I mean, not the most moral things, but not anything. Because like where I would draw the line, like on speech, is like, okay, you're not allowed to threaten me with abduction or my life or bodily harm. So it's like, okay, if he's not doing those things, maybe that's not great.
Right.
but is that a crime? That doesn't look good for. I understand all those things are like taking consideration when you're sentencing somebody for things. The other thing that I find very difficult, and so this is gonna get so like I want to make the distinction between like what's legal and what's moral. So I mean, I very, very, very much believe that from a place of as a man, I don't hit women. I've never done that. I don't condone that.
Yeah.
But I also wonder from a legal standpoint, if I say something to a woman that she doesn't like very much, she can just slap me in the face and like pretty much nothing's going to be done about it. Am I going to go to the cops? No. Is anybody going to see that there's going to be, nobody's going to really care from that standpoint. However, a woman could be getting in my face and I could be, trying to get away, kind of just, giving it to you, giving it to you. Maybe even starting to batter you. Right. Nobody cares. Yeah. Anything can happen. You could try to, walk away swiftly and like brush past them. Yeah. Not to say this is not my experience, but I'm saying just think of a scenario of a couple fighting and then somebody's trying to just get away and she steps in front of him and because he's bigger, she falls down. Right. That looks really bad. Yeah. And, that can be brought up in all type of circumstances and saying, oh, well, look what he did. He's an abusive person. Right. It's like, well, she went to town on the guy and nobody really cared. Right. And I'm thinking from a legal standpoint, we can debate morality, but, what I'm concerned about is like, this is somebody's life. Yeah. Because that's what we're talking about, the context of like where he's going to jail. You go to jail, now you can't work. That affects everything. Yep. So my whole thought is like, well, where does this legal standard go? Like I understand that at the end of the day, every legal standard is up to a judgment. Yeah. Just as like if I steal this laptop, well, we're going to be judged. I'm going to be judged by a jury of my peers. Right. What was the context? Did you steal something of mine first? Like it's still wrong that I do that, but those all things get taken into factored. So I understand that. But what's the legal difference of, when it comes to our system, I just would like to see things a little bit more fair.
Well, based on the evidence, Johnathan Majors' attorney had a lot to say, and this is what he said. And maybe Gabe could jump in and give a take. But Johnathan Majors' attorney tells the public that it's, quote, "It's clear that the jury did not believe Grace Jabari's story." That Grace is the girlfriend. Of what happened in the SUV because they found that Mr. Majors did not intentionally cause any injuries to her. We are grateful for that. Majors' attorney continues to say, quote, "We are disappointed, however, that despite not believing Ms. Jabari, the jury nevertheless found that Mr. Majors was somehow reckless while she was attacking him. Mr. Majors is grateful to God, his family, his friends, and his fans for their love and support during these harrowing 8 months. Mr. Majors still has faith in the process and looks forward to fully clearing his name."
I seem to remember when Marvel got started, they hired a guy to be their like main actor who had gone to jail. I think his name was Robert Downey Jr. Mm-hmm. So, they used to be known for second chances, but I think in the court of public opinion, especially with today with social media and the ease of access, right? If there's a televised court trial, it's so easy now to be able to figure out who's doing what. People find the location, they can Google everything, they can find social media, boom, they're there. Yeah, they can intimidate the jury to try to force something. And, of course, we also have corporations that don't want to have any flack, especially when the majority of their target audience is individuals who care very strongly about the subject matter. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it makes sense, unfortunately, how the chips fell. Right. I feel for the man. You brought up sports. So was the baseball player that recently kind of got acquitted. The girl accused him of rape. He lost his contracts and everything. And then just recently, a bunch of text messages came out saying how she fully intended to get his bag and fully intended to do all these things and how happy she was. Pictures right afterwards, how happy she was. She's confronted on national TV. She's got nothing to say.
Of course not. What is she going to say?
Of course not, right? And this is not the first time this has happened. There's a kicker for football, same basic thing. Yeah. he raped me. He wasn't even there at the party when the supposed act took place.
Yeah.
He had left hours early, et cetera, et cetera.
And just recently, Anthony Edwards from the Minnesota Timberwolves had some type of back and forth with a female Instagram model that he got involved with. She alleged, I don't know if this to be true, but she was like kind of strong arming him to give him money for an abortion, or else she's going to say that he raped him.
I saw something about that.
And then he wanted to settle out of court, and he was offering her $125,000 to keep her mouth shut and just get the abortion. And I'm just like, well, this is...
The IG women are a totally different thing, because those IG women literally know more about the athletes and their stats than the other athletes and their stats.
Yeah, they see them as a come up.
Well, they see them as free money.
Right.
They have a baby from that kid that's alimony for 18 years.
Correct.
Right.
So that just shows the predatory nature of our society, as morals have declined to such a degree that sexuality is no longer stopped being sacred a while ago, but now it's predatory. Yeah. Now it's used, it's weaponized. Sexuality is completely weaponized in our society.
And speaking of weaponized, and I think these people who are behind it all, when they want to use an athlete or entertainer as their come up, they weaponize their social media platforms.
Of course.
And they try to sway public opinion the other way.
Yeah.
She's the one in distress. She's the one that got attacked. She's the one, you know what I'm saying? So it gets pretty dicey as well.
It's ironic, because there's women who want to make sure that everything is equal and there's equality, and then many of those same women will play the victim card as the weaker vessel in order to garner more attention and affection. I think, as he said, our legal foundation is innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
And it should stay that way. Right. And it should never be believe all women. It should never be the court of public opinion. It should be shut up and wait until the facts are out. There's been an accusation. We take the accusation seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do our due diligence to investigate this accusation, but we are not going to condemn a man and strip him of all of his rights and ability to make money because somebody accused him.
Yeah. Right. Especially when if you're listening, if you're watching, watch the videos and then you make your assumptions, but the videos literally show Mr. Majors, Johnathan Majors, the guy that played in Creed, the guy that played Kang the Conqueror in Marvel, was running from this woman who essentially was...
Dude is pulling a Joseph.
Yeah, basically.
So what do you call it? So I just want to go back and touch on it. You said that it was confirmed that he did her no harm?
Correct.
So what is the charges then exactly? Because it's not. You were saying, you mentioned something earlier that was no longer allegations, but it was
reckless endangerment of a person, and I forget what the second charge was.
But it was not a battery. It was not a. So he didn't even actually harm her in any way.
No.
Yeah, I mean that sucks.
And then Marvel,
that really sucks. So it was actually in court.
But the fact that the buzzword is domestic violence. ESPN, Marvel, Disney, all these entities see that. The NFL, the NBA, MLB, they see that, and they want to separate themselves from that situation.
Right.
And I feel
they're all the same parent.
I feel like the most dangerous being to be is a man. And that might sound a little hyperbolic, and I'm using it as being very.
I think it's dangerous in a good way, just as much as it's dangerous in a bad way.
And Andrew Tate speaks on that very, very loudly. Yes, he is a very polarizing individual. He's the most Google searched man the last 2.5 years, 3 years since COVID, essentially. And he had a lot to say about COVID very early on. He had a lot to say about the red pill community very early on. He had a lot to say about the nuclear family and the Western culture very early on. So he has these takes that come off abrasive, come off pretty brash at times, because he does deliver it pretty militant and stuff like that. And he claims that the Matrix, quote unquote, it was trying to deteriorate him, diminish him, and kill his character, and essentially not metaphorically but literally kill him. Because of the narratives that he was trying to preach to the men, because he felt like more than ever men are being attacked. They're being demasculinized, you know that.
we're not just saying it off the cuff and being overly opinionated. It's out there. Like if you guys have been alive the last few years, you've seen it in all platforms.
I mean, testosterone levels are just down in all of the Western world.
All across the board. And then, Tate right now is battling a legal, very serious accusations.
Right.
There's sex trafficking. There's what's the other charges that he has multiple charges of sex trafficking and for lack of a better term, he was being accused of being a internet pimp.
Right.
And pimping out OF models and
the
list goes on and on. And now they couldn't find anything on him. They froze all his assets. They looked at all his multiple businesses that he has. They found nothing. Mm-hmm. But yet he did a year and a day in a Romanian prison, sleeping with cockroaches, from what he was telling the podcast that he was on.
Tucker Carlson podcast, right? Was that the one that was really
correct?
In-depth about
pretty
his
in-depth.
situation?
And he kind of went away after the Tucker podcast, and then he surfaced again when he got into with George Jenko from. He was a former co-host in the Impulsive podcast with Logan Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So
I wanted to touch a little bit about. We could talk about Andrew Tate. And there's people that like he's just polarizing. He's like you love him or you hate him. So like one of the things that I've come to like when I look at him, I'm like, he has a lot of the symptoms, right? So it's like, okay, there's clearly a problem. Yeah. And I would say that Andrew Tate's probably right on when he talks about the problem. Right. And as a man...
But he's a bit of an egomaniac.
Where I would disagree is his solutions.
Right.
I think that's where I'm at. And like, as a man, you have to be very careful because like...
He's very prideful. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm saying, you think about, okay, this is the culture that's against me. For whatever reason, I'm married and we're good. But like, for whatever reason, if my wife decides to leave me, like my court system is like against me for my assets, for my children. Like it's against me. Like it's just that just is what it is. Mm-hmm. By default, I'm at a disadvantage because of that. Right. Those would be arguments that he would make. And it's like, well, the system is like, well, you push back and you bully back. And that's kind of Andrew Tate's prescription. Right. And, my whole thing is like, well, let's go back to a biblical worldview. Yeah. Let's go back to the rights of men and women. Let's go back to the sanctity of marriage. And like, for whatever reason, you have to like not be together because of, situations that you just can't, unreconcilable differences.
The hardness of your heart, as Jesus put it.
Right. But let's not be, let's try to be at least fair about it. So let's look at these as two individuals who couldn't make it work, and let's be fair, as opposed to, well, he's the man, let's give him the shaft, I can agree that there is a problem, but that the answer is not like, well, let's just take it out. Let's just push back. The woman wants to be treated like a man. Let's push her like a man. Like, no, I don't want to, and I don't think he advocates for physical violence, but I'm talking about from a legal standpoint. Like, well, instead of her cleaning you out, you clean her out, type thing. It's like, I don't want that either, I'd like us to all be together. I'd like us to say, hey, let's fight for marriages. Let's fight our differences. And in the absolute desperate situations where that can't be, well, let's at least be civil and understand that these are two human beings going through something very difficult, regardless if you're, as somebody who has been divorced. Mm-hmm. And, I can talk about regretting that and all that. But that was actually marriage I didn't want to be in, even at that particular moment. It's an extremely painful thing to go through. Right. Let's just be decent about it as best we can. Yeah. So like that's kind of where I'm thinking from that perspective, and like almost take that type of heart and put that into every situation when it comes to just the workplace. It's like almost like his attitude is like, well, let's get rid of all the women. You know, hey, can you really do my job? Let's swing the sledgehammer on the concrete. He's like, well, no, I don't really want to go on that route.
Yeah, no, and I think that Andrew Tate's initial take on certain societal issues, especially when he looks at the Western culture, were very they're very abrasive, very pushbacky. The prescriptions that he was early on it was that. I think now, and I'm by any means, I am not an Andrew Tate apologist by any means, guys. I'm kind of just playing in the middle here and having this for the sake of conversation. Yeah. But I've been following the guy for the last 3 years, and I do see
some growth, because the fact of the matter is he's actually sitting down with people of substance, and he's actually having conversations about some of these societal issues that we experience, right? Some of the takes that he has are obviously content worthy, and he does do it purposely just to troll, and that's his brand, and that's what he does, and a lot of it is very, very performative. He knows that he's in front of a camera. He knows that he's talking to. He knows his audience, right. And he knows who he's talking to when he's sitting down with the Nelk Boys, when the Full Send podcast. Well, he knows when he's sitting down with the Impulsive Crew, with Logan Paul and all these guys. He knows when he's sitting down with Tucker. He knows his audience. And then most recently, he sat down with George Janko, and George Janko has shown that he is unapologetically a Christian, that he's a struggling Christian, because he's admitted that he hasn't walked a pure life, that he has a girlfriend that he's currently cohabiting with, and he's still struggling with that idea, and he's asking questions, and he's reaching out to elders in the church community to help him walk that as he's building this empire since he's left Impulsive, and now he's landed a big interview that not many people land, and that's the big whale Andrew Tate. Right. And I do have a clip that maybe you guys can kind of not overact, but react to. And I think it's in the part 2 of the interview in Into the Hour, and well, that's an ad there.
Yeah, and then I'll jump in on my thoughts on Andrew Tate afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. Gotta love ads. Gotta love ads.
YouTube has enough of my data. They don't need my money too.
Yeah. So I think this is it right here.
Gift of reaching out to more people.
Correct.
So another household could have 5 kids, but who's to say that I can't encourage them to have my morals and standpoints?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't need to procreate. I need to provide and educate.
That's a very interesting point of view. But then you also, this brings us into the Islam versus Christianity argument.
So this is the Islam. To the world. So right now they're going to dive into the Islam versus Christianity, and it's no secret that he converted from Christianity. Not his brother, but just Tate. His brother still is a practicing Orthodox Christian. Their family comes from Armenic, Romanian Christian, Orthodox Christian background, but he chose to convert to Islam because of his reasons. But we won't get into that. But this is what he touches on when it comes to Christian viewpoints and Islamic viewpoints with George Janko. Here we go.
I'm not anti-Christian in any way. Most of my family is Christian. My brother is Christian. For a long time, when I
Tristan's Christian?
Yeah, he's Christian.
Cool. He's happy and he has fun.
Yeah, that's right. Perhaps that's why. When I first stopped being atheistic, I diverted to Christianity because it was all I knew. Because I was raised Christian. I went to church as a kid. It's all I knew. But you're talking about the fact that, yeah, people can come into the nation, but if they become Christians once they arrive, then the Christian faith survives. Yeah. But I think that for that to happen, there would have to be some form of power gap or power vacuum, and it's not atheists which are arriving, and it's going to be very difficult to convince them out of Islam into Christianity, and I'll tell you why. I am not an Islamic scholar, and I don't consider myself knowledgeable on Islam. I'm new to the religion. I'm only a year in, and I'm studying as best I can, but there's a lot of people who know more than me. But from my understanding and my practices, Islam is very rigid. And it's strict, and you know what's right and you know what's wrong. And it provides solutions and answers in a very strict, non-ambiguous way. And I feel like if you live a difficult life, like we talked about earlier about why my fan base is so galvanized and why they believe in me, because I offer rigid solutions to problems. And if you come from a difficult place, or you raised in a difficult country or a war zone, you're going to look for that rigidity. I don't think the softness of Christianity, and I don't say that as an insult, I just state that as a matter of fact, will be appealing to people who have come from war zones. I just don't, I think it's going to be very difficult to convert them to Christianity. And we're seeing now in the Western world, huge proportions of Christian countries are now just becoming Islamic strongholds, and they can't be penetrated or changed.
And okay, so, but you're making it seem like a lot of people that worship Islam, they're very, very strict with their policies. There's a lot that and by the way, let me speak positively about Islam so people don't confuse my nature.
We're friends here, by the way, everyone. We're all the same. Yeah, I
don't
agree.
speak for me. I'm saying,
So this is George Janko's pushback.
Right.
Because if you haven't picked up on it yet, and for those that are listening, if you haven't picked up on it yet, he literally articulated grace versus works.
Right.
He talked about Islamic viewpoints being rigid, their beliefs being rigid. They have to perform a certain way for them to be looked at as good to their God, to their prophet Allah, right? To their God Allah, right? And that's works. It's not grace.
Right.
And that's ultimately the biggest difference between both Christianity and Islam. And this is what George, real quick, this is what George Janko's take on what he just said about rigidity and the Islamic faith.
No, I really respect Islam for one reason: the way they stand up for their God.
Absolutely.
And I actually take notes from them.
Yep.
So I don't want anybody. In fact, my God is their prophet.
Yep.
So we do see a lot of eye to eye. We just don't see the final destination of who God is.
Correct.
But I definitely respect anybody in their faith, and I think I'd rather you have faith in a God than you have no faith in a God at all.
Agreed.
So we're on the same plane for that.
Okay. I'll push back on that.
Yeah.
But to say that Christians have values and they don't follow them, and Islam does, it's not true. I have many friends. For example, you're Islamic now, but you drink and you smoke.
No, I don't drink.
Not anymore. But there's a lot that I have friends with that do.
Yeah.
So the theory of them not following their rules that's just a man. I don't think that's a religion. I think every man falls short.
Yeah.
I think this is the truth. I think an Islamic man that stands in front of me sins against God. And I think a Christian man sins against God.
Oh, yeah, we're not perfect in any regard.
Yeah.
But let's tie back to something I said earlier.
He's going to tie it back to something that he said earlier. Yeah. But that's pretty much the crux of it all, how they debated Islam and Christianity. Right. And George Janko was on the right track. And granted, George Janko is still walking his salvation. He's trying to still figure it out.
It's touch and go.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to take a step back.
Yeah.
My personal views on Andrew Tate.
Mm-hmm.
So he was accused of sex trafficking in Romania. Whether or not what he did was sex trafficking or not, he himself on podcasts has admitted, and you can go through in the Warrior Poet Society YouTube channel, John Lovell went over this and he kind of broke down some of those podcasts where Andrew did admit to essentially cucking men out of their money.
And he also did admit that he'd used the lover boy tag to get to...
And pretended to be women and used women and then talked about how these men would spend so much money.
But that's
it's not a crime.
No,
immoral, but not a crime.
Immoral, but not a crime.
Right.
And so, and maybe he could have changed from doing that, but to pridefully say how he subverted weak men and used them against them to make his money, that he now uses to boost his platform as his opulence and his wealth. Mm-hmm. That is an immoral person that I do not think is necessarily worthy of the praise to such a degree that he's been getting. What I agree with you 100%. He diagnoses the problem very accurately, and then he prescribes a solution that is not functional.
Right.
And coinciding then stepping into this conversation where he converted to Islam because he sought the rigidity of Islam to the weakness of Christianity.
Right.
And Christians are not called to be weak; they're called to be meek. And Jordan Peterson touches on this, where meekness is not being defenseless; it's having a sword and knowing when to keep it sheathed.
Right.
And in this context, I think ultimately there have been many weak Christians who did not stand up for their faith in Western culture.
Right.
That is the direct result leading to this weakness that is then getting overshadowed by the rigidity of Islam. We also have to understand there's practically a replacement theory of immigrants being rushed into these nations, these once Christian nations, and Islam conquered half of Europe at one point and was beaten back through war and through crusades.
Oh yeah.
And so there's lots of different contexts there. The difference between a strong Muslim being portrayed and a strong Christian being portrayed is a strong Muslim being portrayed is, as you had mentioned, works. He does works for Allah, and that shows that he is a strong Muslim. Whereas a strong Christian is portrayed as someone who, especially in the New Testament, goes through intense suffering, only through the power of Christ, and that is the strong Christian. And in that sacrifice, in that taking the suffering that Jesus suffered, bearing the cross, that pervades through and conquers far more than rigidity itself. And the more it's the reason why Christianity grew so much is because it was persecuted so much. And so yes, when there's no persecution, it gets weak until it then gets persecuted again.
It gets strong.
But it's not going to go out. I think in this context, given Andrew Tate's capacity for showmanship, I don't necessarily trust him. But as the devil once said, I think it was in the Screw Tape letters, in order to tell a good lie, you have to have some truth in it. And I think the enemy is masterfully spinning a web through Andrew Tate with a good bit of truth, i.e. acknowledging what the problems are, to then divert people away from genuine faith in something higher than themselves.
I want to ask both of you guys' thoughts on this, because this is kind of in my perspective when he, talked about the softness of Christianity. And, I think that when you look at it from a Western perspective, and I don't want to say that, every Western Christian is a weak Christian. But I want to talk about like what actually gets attention. And I don't want to say that every person who is a practice of Islam in the West or globally is somebody who like truly takes their faith seriously. Because the reality is that the majority of both faiths are apathetic. When we really look at it, the majority of people who believe in Islam are actually apathetic in their faith just as much as Christianity, just as much as Judaism. The reality is it's minority who take what they believe seriously on a day-to-day life in every belief system. No matter what you're doing. So I look at this, but what's really getting attention? If you're in the West today, you're looking at Islam is like, well, these people are willing to die. Like that's what you just ask, if you do a, man on the street interviews, like, what do you think about people of Islam? Like, do you think they're willing to die for it? Well, all we see is like that's a headline, people willing to die for Islam. The reality is most people do not take it that seriously. If they're following Islam. If we were to go to a mosque today, not everybody's willing to go to that extent. The minority gets that attention. And also what gets the attention of the Christianity in the West. It's the mega church. I don't want to bash it. I don't want to bash the church. I look at those as the, evangelistic ministries where it's like, yes, come in as you are. Maybe they're not preaching the repentance they should. I'm not their pastor. We can get into all that at one point or another. But it's almost this come as you are. And it's not telling the other side, it's like, but I love you so much, I'm not going to keep you there. Like that's not getting the attention.
I mean, there's been known pastors who subscribe to the grace card. Do whatever you want. God is good. God is good. God is good, and God loves you.
Definitely, those are the headlines you're getting. You're getting these two headlines. So it's like definitely paints the perception of Islam strong, Christianity soft.
Paul says for believers to judge other believers. So I think it is well within your purview to say, hey, I don't think that church is doing the right thing.
Right. I mean, yes. And I will agree with you. I guess because I've thought about that deeply, and this is like a whole podcast in its own self, is talking about where it is in the church. Like if, let's say, there's a mega church down the road. I don't know that pastor. I don't know him. I have to believe, at least in my heart, for my sanity, that most of these mega church pastors are essentially evangelists. They're not really pastors, but they're evangelists, and their heart is to spread the gospel. Now, maybe they're not transferring these people to the smaller groups that they should, essentially smaller churches, because I'm not like pro, hey, let's have small group and anybody who wants to be a leader, can, but you need to find a pastor who's going to pastor you. So that would kind of be my challenge. But I also would say maybe they don't know that. And I would have to think that I like to believe that most of these megachurch pastors are genuinely just trying to get the gospel out. And they don't know how to pastor because they're not pastors, they're evangelists. And because of cultural, corruption, they think that, well, this is all it is. I, on the other half, don't believe it's like, when I'm reading the scripture, it's like, in fear and trembling vigilantly every day, I'm supposed to work out my salvation. Well, I'm not going to get that from hearing a good, encouraging message every week.
Yeah.
It's going to be having men in my life challenging me and pushing me toward greatness.
A little leaven leavens the whole lump, right?
Right.
So a little bit of yeast will make a whole piece of flatbread turn into a loaf.
Absolutely.
And so if we compromise in a megachurch, especially in leadership, because it's just big and they're doing a good thing, and Paul says whether in pretense or in truth the gospel is being preached.
Right.
So yeah, that's fine. But if we say that's okay, then we breed the very culture that brought us to our cultural moment in the United States of debauchery in the first place, which almost kind of, if I can shift gears a bit, just 2 days ago or a day ago, there was staffers in the Senate filming a homosexual sex tape in the place where our nation's laws are made.
Right. And
those people have been fired. And it's too young for the story to say whether that's going to be the worst of it. But most likely will be because of the side that they happen to fall on. But the fact of the matter is, our nation has made it a point to desecrate the sacred on all levels.
Right.
It's a hobby of individuals to find what anyone thinks is sacred simply to desecrate it.
Right.
There's definitely individuals like that.
Yeah, we call them trolls, right?
And believe it or not, because we were just touching on Andrew Tate, in that same interview, in that same podcast, he literally, in his own interpretation, just kind of echoed what you just said. Trolls and why society is what it is in the United States because of these social media influencers that have more of a voice than the people that we should be listening to at our local churches, at our, learning institutions, at the traditional institutions where we were supposed to learn and gather information, gather data to equip us and prepare us and empower us to be better human beings. Kids now in our generation are going to that influencer on TikTok, that influencer on YouTube and Instagram. So you get the Sneakos of the world, you get the Andrew Tates of the world, you get the Neons of the world, the Nelk Boys of the world that are being more of a voice to the youth. And you getting the byproduct of that is not getting a well-equipped and suited man. They're getting a bunch of clowns who are trolling one another to monetize and make a buck.
Yeah, but those people are a byproduct in and of themselves. I mean, think about it. When we first sent up astronauts to see the Earth, those astronauts read from Genesis chapter 1. And then they were attacked by a woman, this is like in the 60s, by a woman who was upset that they read scripture on national television for a public works thing. She was a part of the atheist coalition.
Right.
These people were seeing something humans had never seen before.
Right.
They were in tune with their creator.
Yeah.
And people are getting attacked even back then simply because of the degradation of moral standing based on relativity and rational to irrational arguments.
Right.
Fast forwarding to where we are now.
It's more amplified.
It's more amplified.
Because
we have social media. We
correct.
have complete access to the internet. We used to live in a world where, they say that you can tell by a certain part of the brain what the size of the tribe is for a given species. So like chimpanzees is like 20 and chipmunks is like 2 and whatever.
Right.
Lions is like whatever number it is. But humans, the average is 150.
Right.
And our tribe, beyond that, you begin to lose touch. And so we were designed to be in a place where we had known and, connections with 150 people, roughly.
Right.
Now, in the span of the last 20 years, we have access to 8 billion people. Right. And in those 150 people, we knew the tragedies of those 150 people. Now we know the tragedies of those 8 billion people streaming into our consciousness at any given day and any given time across everything, completely saturating us to the degree we can't even think straight.
Yeah. There's a lot of idiocy that is more exposed and revealed to the general public.
Precisely.
I do believe that.
And it is a byproduct of loose morality that then begets more loose morality that then pushes us to a place where we lose our foundation of a nation, where we don't see an issue with, or even we're not, maybe we see the issue, where people don't see the issue with pressuring a jury because of their own opinions on incomplete facts, where people see that they can try to lock up their political dissidents and keep them from legal processes to run for office, where people can then desecrate the most sacred parts of a nation, where people who are invited in by the cops, by the Capitol Police for pretty much a tour, get attacked to the highest level of the law. But a person who goes and has a sex tape filming inside there gets a slap on the wrist.
Well,
Welcome to America.
I want to touch on that a little bit. So, just curious, what are you thinking? Because they did get fired, the sex tape.
They should go to prison.
You think they should go to prison for
public indecency?
Yeah.
It was behind. So. So let me think about this. I don't have my mind made up.
Then there's laws too, because now their defense is, well, that was not for public view. There's now
it was posted onto websites.
But I understand that. But their defense could say that wasn't for public viewing. How it got leaked and posted on websites is beyond them, right? I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
And also there's rules and regulations now of quote revenge porn. And that's within itself a crime. So the person that might have allegedly leaked these things on these so-called websites can also face criminal prosecution.
I think it was one of the two people in the video that posted it.
And they can face criminal prosecution if proven...
Possibly. But I think if you're going to talk about desecration of public property in regards to insurrection...
we're talking about January 6th.
January 6th, right? So you're going to say that this was an insurrection and try to change public policy, and that's the main crux for how heavy they're trying to hit this. But realistically, they're just trying to make examples out of old women who were literally lost and found their way into the Capitol because they were following a crowd.
What did you say about, because like my whole thing is when it comes to, because it's like, when does a protest become a riot? Like that's like a whole like discussion. Like when is that? And for me, it's property damage or it becomes bodily harm.
That's the
and so it's
drawn.
like, for me, it's like whoever does property damage, prosecute them to whatever it is. If I smash this window and I'm by myself, well, it's the same whether I'm with 100 people or I'm by myself. It's the same, I want the same prime punishment. No, same thing. If I come up and punch you in the face and I'm just by myself or I'm around 100 people, it should be, the same process. I want the same punishment doled out equally. So I'm very pro, anybody who did anything, the people did goofy things like broke out windows and stuff, let's prosecute them. What would be the crime if I took a hammer to the window at the Capitol today? Prosecute them based on that. That's what I would like to see for that. Because, I'm very pro in the sense of what do I want the law to be? I want harsh penalties for life, liberty, and property offenses. So I can't steal your stuff, I can't kill you, and I can't abduct you and make you my slave. Like basically, those are the three things I want protected, and I want very harsh penalties in order to deter that. Then when you talk about something like, so you talk about the public indecency. So it's like, I would also be pro that in the sense of like, it was out in the open. Like if they did it, in the halls of the Capitol, like obviously that's very public indecent. They did it in the office. I'm just curious, just my thoughts. Like, I really want to compel people to morality. I don't want to coerce them. Yeah. And my whole thing of like, why I want harsh sentencing on life, liberty, and property offenses is not really to compel people to do good. It's more of like, I want to protect the rights of the individual, where once we get outside of that realm of life, liberty, and property, and this is just my thoughts, I'm just talking to you. I want to compel people and not necessarily like make it a coercion of like, well, I need you to do, sexual morality my way. Right. I mean, I would like to, I think that it should be all in the confines of marriage and with one person, hopefully for the rest of your life. I think that's the perfect ideal design. Right. You go outside of that. Do I want to like start? I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Like, I'm perfectly happy with them getting fired. Like, that's for sure. I don't know about prison. Sounds a little extreme to me. I just kind of want thoughts on that.
Here's the thing. I hear you. Yeah. And a basic moral argument. I get that. The thing that irks me and I think needs to be taken more seriously is the sacredness of certain situations in certain places.
Right.
So you could argue that if,
in other words, it wasn't done at a gymnasium, at a high school gymnasium.
It's not their property. So either way, since it's meant to be public property,
right.
Okay.
It's part of the government. That's still public. If somebody is doing that act in an airplane and they get caught trying to get into the Mile High Club, they're still going to be punished,
right?
Even if they were behind the bathroom door.
Yeah.
Right. So this is public property. This
so
is
it's punishable to.
It's meant to be sacred as common ground, and for somebody to film an obscene act in that sacred place and then post it, in and of itself, is wrong, and it is public exposure. It is desecration of a national monument, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that when you look at a statute, right, that is violated. So per statute, and obviously every state has its different statutes, its different laws and
sure.
regulations.
And I don't know those laws.
So in a felony crime, right, done in the state of Florida versus a felony crime done in our nation's capital. Per statute, it could be up to a year. Let's just say up to a year and a day in jail.
Right.
Right. So that's considered, being transferred from a county jail to doing actual prison time if you're doing over a year.
Right.
In the state of Florida, if you are sentenced, because I worked at the clerk's office, so I worked at the Circuit Criminal Division. So if you are sentenced by a judge because of a heinous crime or whatever crime that you violate, whatever statute you violated, and you are sentenced now to a year and a day or up to a year, you're going to be transferred from county jail to prison. You're going to be in prison cohabiting with rapists, murderers, and killers. So what you're saying is that these individuals who violated this statute is deserved a year and a day in a prison?
Now, here's, in my opinion, I think that desecrating something that's sacred in that way and then posting on it.
So categorically, you say yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think
you.
But I'm going to add context here. I don't know the laws.
Okay.
I don't know whether that person broke security protocol getting the second person in there. I don't know whether they both had access to it.
Right.
I don't know whether access was restricted after certain times, so they therefore broke security access. I don't know what the parameters of what crime specifically would be done. I think that the act in and of itself is so heinous that it needs to be punished to the point where it is completely deterred from needing to do it again.
Okay.
Or anybody else wanting to do it again.
And that's fair, the way within that context, that's fair, because obviously a Joe Schmo who does...
Yes, and I'm not a judge.
Right.
I'm not going to pass... This is my opinion. I think that guy should go to prison.
Okay.
I don't know. Let the law play out. Let the rules go as they may. Let it be investigated. Don't let them just be fired and that's it.
And what was their job description again?
I think one of them was a staffer.
Yeah, they're staffers for a senator, I believe.
Yeah, for a senator.
And they were in what party again? Because I'm not...
They're Democratic.
And it's okay to say it here.
No. I think it's funny because there's another Democratic senator, I think in like Virginia or something like that, who she was posting sex tapes of her own on her own OnlyFans, and she's running.
And by the way, we're not saying that all Democrats are extreme leftists neither, because I know some Democrats who subscribe to a lot of Republican-based. For lack of a better term, ideologies. Let's just say
it's definitely gotten more polarized over the years.
Right.
But it's becoming more common that sexual deviancy is the norm
in America. And do you think that that's why you have these polarizing individuals who have these massive platforms, like the individuals we just mentioned, say that this is why America is the laughingstock of the globe? Do you think that's why? And then they would tell people, make your money and go live elsewhere because you can live great in Dubai or the Netherlands or Sweden or all these other countries and stuff like that. Like, do you think that that's why we are made out to be the laughingstock? I mean, it seems anyway.
Well, I mean, one thing we have to think is we look at you can You can judge America for all its flaws. And it's
Right.
like if you compare America to Utopia, of course it's going to have flaws. When you start to compare it to other countries, you also have to look at like circumstances. So you look at Sweden. Homogenous culture, homogenous racially, homogenous like religiously for the most part.
For the
like
most
yes,
part.
there's immigration that's coming in and that's causing massive disruption. By the way. And for us, we actually have all that diversity here. And to think that you're going to be in a free society not being homogenized, that becomes very difficult. Because it only comes to a certain point. You know, it's like you just even take the idea of freedom of religion. It's like, well, we're actually not compatible with the actual law of Islam. Like we do not do honor killings. Like if somebody denounces, you know,
Christianity, we're not going to kill.
We're not going to kill you. Well, no. Well, but even here in this country, like we cannot honor. You know, that's a thing in Islam.
We're not going to throw people who are sexually deviant off of rooftops.
Right.
In America,
exactly. So like that's my whole thing. It's like so you talk about this and that. It's like well, that's a homogenous country. So it's like yes, when you're culturally homogenous, it's very easy for everyone to get along. It's like when you start to have diversity, which you're seeing a lot of Western European countries starting to recognize, and they've been judging the United States very harshly, which we've been diversity like on a cultural basis, almost
the most
last
diverse
100
country.
years.
Most diverse country,
Right. So like you have to take those things into consideration. But I mean at the center, like you have to have something at a culture, some cultural values, and like that's where I put it. At life, liberty, and property. That's kind of where I want to be. And so, like, yes, you're going to be a laughingstock because of all these things. And the whole thing is, like, the states were supposed to almost be like their own countries. And the whole point was, like, man, if I don't like it, I get to move. Thank God I'm already in Florida.
And if you don't like it, though, like, there is legislation that you can write to.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's part of your civic duty, too, right?
I think also that has been misrepresented as well. And the entire system has been messed with significantly. But I want to touch on something before I get to that point. You mentioned that we are the most diverse nation. We used to be called the melting pot. However, somebody turned off the heat because now everybody just wants to stay their own ingredients. The idea is we melt into the common. It was founded on Christian core values of this nation. And we agree upon those values, and that's what we live under. That was the melting pot. That was the fire in our souls.
Well, our founding fathers took the Judeo-Christian beliefs to kind of push
and
to a better flourishing society.
And now because of the push for secularism, it is completely incompatible with what is necessary, what I think Benjamin Franklin said, that people need to be moral in order for them to be free. Otherwise, it just turns to degeneracy.
Or anarchy, even. If we're going to go to that extreme.
Anarchy, just chaos, civil war, any number of options. So dial it back. The original founders, when they created our system, created us to fully focus on the state's elections and the state's representatives, and then the Senate was to be elected by the state's representatives. So we were supposed to have great focus on who our close...
Touch it and then do it again, so that way you don't have to get up again.
Who our close electors were supposed to be. So the idea was, I know all of my local politicians, I know everything they stand for and every one of their policies, and we're in a town of maybe 500 people, so my vote counts very heavily. My vote influences who that guy is who represents me, and then that guy goes to the Senate of the state, and he votes on my behalf who's going to go into the Senate in Washington. Then, I think I forgot what year it was, they changed it to where the Senate in Washington is also down to a public vote, diluting the entire process of integrity and of responsibility of the individual. Now, this person in Washington represents 700,000 people. Or if they're a senator, they represent, Florida has, 21 million people in it?
Yeah, around 18 to 21 million.
I think we're 22.
So Florida has 22 million people. We have two senators. That one senator is supposed to represent 11 million people. And
the math is not mathing.
And my vote counts. So in this we've already deconstructed. We weren't even supposed to have taxes. Taxes were supposed to be temporary, during a wartime effort. And now 40% of my paycheck gets taken from me, For what? Failing social programs and diversity and inclusion in Pakistan,
right?
Or Ukraine. I'm sending salvos into Russian strongholds in Ukraine through my tax dollars.
Yeah.
That I didn't want to vote on this.
Yeah.
I didn't get a vote on this.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So there are many problems with the United States, but the fact remains that we have the greatest foundation for a nation anywhere in the world. No other nation has the First Amendment enshrined like we do.
Right.
No other nation has the Second Amendment enshrined to protect the First Amendment like we do. No other nation has its citizens as the largest standing army in the world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No other nation can say that. No other nation can do that.
Yeah.
And the fact is, because our bones and our foundation is good, it is very easy for the Holy Spirit to wash over us, run through as many of the revivals as have taken place in this nation.
Yeah.
Look at the Jesus Revolution. We were in a similar situation then as we are today. Here it's worse because we have social media.
Right.
But back then we were in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And the Lord came and changed everything, brought an entire generation of people who cared for him again.
Yeah. And it was an eruption.
It was an eruption.
Because it started in California and then it erupted into Dallas, Texas.
And it swept the nation.
And it swept the nation. And we're kind of in the incline of that.
I mean, if you ask my perspective, I think we are. I would even say we look back to the 60s, man. Like a lot of people, like I think this is almost human nature.
Yeah.
We look at the current time and say this is the worst it's ever been, and it's only getting worse.
Right.
Or as bad as it's ever been, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah.
And every generation culturally has thought that.
Yeah.
And I'll just take it step back. Let's just go to the 60s. The 60s, we were way closer to World War III than we are now with Russia. We had more terrorist attacks in this country in the 1960s than any other time. When you start talking about communism, we talk about the Black Panthers, we talk about bombings that were happening, way worse in the 60s.
And domestic bombings that were happening too.
Well, that's what I was talking about. It was much more domestic. It wasn't necessarily, when we think about terrorists today, we think about people from the outside coming in. It was more people from the inside trying to start revolution.
Right.
So we look at that, we look at inflation, we look at the state of economy, we look at the decline of the nuclear family, we look at all that.
Yeah.
And then it's like all of a sudden we have this Jesus revolution, and not to get super political, but Ronald Reagan was elected by an overwhelming majority.
Right.
I think he only lost, at least in the continental United States, the only state he lost on his first election was Minnesota.
Okay.
California, believe it or not, was a red state not that long ago. Ronald Reagan won that, and he won that on the policy. So, and I don't say that to just get completely political. I'm saying look at a shift of a nation in 15, 20 year span. If we were living in that time, people were thinking, oh, this is it. This is the decline of society. This is the worst. And I would say, you have a lot of reason to believe and feel that way right now. And we see what happened. So, not to say politics saved us, though. Jesus saved us. And it's, not the political kingdom.
Hence the Jesus Revolution.
Right. It's not the political kingdom, but it's a kingdom that's inside the hearts and minds. And then it's like, okay, now that shapes policy. Because then that's going to change how I treat you. How I treat everybody around me. That's going to change how I vote. That's going to believe what I think should be law and not law.
Politics is always downstream from culture.
Absolutely. And what shapes culture? It's religion.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. Right now, we are experiencing a boom in the religion of self.
No. Well, atheism. Oh, atheism. Well, we could just say satanism.
Exactly.
Satanism
is the religion of self.
Yeah.
And it's the religion of, well, my gender defines me. Well, my identity defines me. Right. Well, my race defines me.
Right.
And I am the most important thing here because I am the victim and I am oppressed and therefore I am entitled and therefore I know better than you, and therefore I will oppress you because I've been oppressed. It's very twisted, but it's the religion of self, right? And more Christians are being passive to it. Mm-hmm. What I think differentiates this time from the 60s is, one, our interconnectivity.
That's definitely different.
All those explosions and things that half the people in the country didn't even know they happened.
Correct. That's why a lot of people even
everybody in the country knows if Joe Biden trips on his bicycle. It's and it's put into any number of reels and half the talk shows, and boom, now you have millions of people.
Now it goes viral.
And it goes viral.
Yeah.
The second thing, I think we are just as close now to World War III with Russia as we were back then, because we have a buffoon of a president who is being pulled with strings by all the corporations who make money off of the war over there, using it to test out their weapons. And don't get me wrong, I am a weapons enthusiast, but they're making money here.
Yeah.
And they have corporate interests that far outweigh Papa Joe's ice cream.
Yeah.
So we are in a very precarious situation where it's high. What was it? Just last week, the NATO decided to restart conversations to bring Ukraine into NATO. If Ukraine gets put into NATO, we are at World War III.
Yeah.
That is it, because we are bound to help the other nation.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So we are extremely close to World War III. Whether it goes nuclear, I don't know. But we're extremely close to a potential hot war with U.S. troops on the ground in full force, not special forces doing stuff shady they're probably already doing over there.
Yeah.
But we're there. Right. All right. On top of that, you also have the possibility of China actively preparing to invade Taiwan, which is where we get most of our chips.
Right.
The whole world does. 92% of the chips come out of Taiwan.
Yeah, and 90% of the rare earth materials come out of China, and so we're all kind of grabbed by the balls there. Pardon my French. And so you have that context. You have the interconnectivity. You also the fact that technology has lulled the human mind to a point of apathy that has never been seen before in society. It's like the opioids of the Chinese opium epidemic. Except that we're addicted to our cell phones that are rechargeable.
Yeah.
And we have access anywhere we go, and it's socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, the biggest drug in America is attention now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And pornography.
Right.
And so between those two, you have doped up kids who just can't get a hit of dopamine, and they can't last more than 15 seconds to think straight. Right. So when somebody gives them a 15-second truth on TikTok, that's how they vote.
Yeah.
And so I think... objectively, maybe we're not the worst the world has ever been. Maybe not even to say that we are the worst that America has ever been, because we've had a freaking civil war, and there's people talking about that too. Yeah. But the fact is, we're not in a good place.
I agree.
But I agree with that too. But haven't we not been in a good place for about 100 years? If we look at it in a macro level.
Right. There's always been trauma. There's always been the threat of nuclear war. There's always been World War I, World War II, the Spanish flu. And that helped me to not be depressed about it. Right? I learned all that part.
And actually feel safe living in America. Because I still feel safe living in the United States of America. Like, I wouldn't trade.
As long as I'm not in like a big city.
Right, but what I'm saying, but again, macro, right?
As long as I'm in Florida.
In a macro view, like, would you trade this country for another country?
There's no way.
Of course not.
Okay, so categorically, like, we can agree that this is but the best country to currently live in the last 100 years. No matter what transpired in the last 100 years, this country is still the best country to live in.
And that brings me to my point. Yes, we are in a dark place. Arguably, there could be some semantics where we may be the second or third worst place in our nation's history.
But I feel like
there is hope here. We are the last bastion of freedom. Right. No other place codifies in their document, their founding document, hey, if the government's being wrong, it's your responsibility to overthrow it.
Right.
We literally have that enshrined in our Bill of Rights, in our founding documents.
Right.
So nobody else has that.
Yeah.
We have that.
Right.
There is hope here.
Right.
But even if that route is to be explored, it's going to be getting darker before the dawn. First of all. Second of all, men, as Andrew Tate, we were talking about Andrew Tate and being dangerous. We were made to be dangerous.
Right.
God designed us to be dangerous because He made us in His image. And Exodus 15 says the Lord is a warrior and the Lord is His name.
Right.
And the Lord talks about how He brings destruction in times of judgment.
Right.
Right. We're made in His image. We're called to be dangerous.
Right.
And part of being dangerous, part of being meek, i.e., knowing how to use the sword, but also knowing when to use it.
Let's be more specific, though. It's part of being a controlled dangerous.
Exactly.
Because a dangerous that is not controlled is actually a psychopath.
That's the meekness, knowing when to use it. Right. Just
for the viewers.
Yeah, I'm not calling for violence in any way.
Yeah. Just for the viewers that get lost in the sauce when we use certain verbiages. So I'm kind of dumbing it down for you.
What I mean by dangerous, and what I'm going to focus into is that as Christians, as kingdom culture, we are called to be dangerous by being strong and devoted
and meek
to our faith.
Right.
And in our faith, the Holy Spirit puts us in places where you can dangerously challenge somebody's assumptions even about their own gender in love and bring about a change to a society through your actions of self-sacrifice in a world that's constantly telling you to be selfish.
Yeah.
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
We're called to live in a dangerous place where you stand up for your family at the school board and you make sure they're not showing your kids pornography in the library, even if the FBI is going to call you
and
a
shout out
terrorist.
to the parents that are doing that.
Yes!
That's such a sign of relief when I see these videos of parents standing up.
It's hope.
And not just figuratively standing on a table, but literally standing on tables and saying, I am not allowing you to teach my kids this rhetoric.
Bro, and
we need more.
Here's the white pill. Here's the white pill, right? I heard it once said that if God doesn't judge America because of what we've been doing, then he owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. I honestly, I vibe with that to a degree.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I remember my boy, Abraham, saying, Lord, if there are 50 righteous, withhold judgment. Lord, if there are 20 righteous, withhold judgment. Lord, if there is 10 righteous in Sodom, withhold judgment. And there weren't even 10 righteous.
Right.
But here in the United States, we have more than 10 people who are on their knees, dangerously praying, Lord, do whatever it takes. Use me to save this nation. There are people dangerously praying, saying, Lord, the enemy is taking over at every turn. Turn him back and change these people's minds. And people say, oh, you're a bigot because you don't think I should be doing, I should have sex with on the camera screen and wherever I want to have it.
Or I can switch genders whenever I want.
You tell them,
how I feel.
I disagree with you is dangerous. But the fact that we can say in love, I'm sorry, there's truth. And you need to hear it because your heart is in danger of death by hellfire. That's dangerous. And that's the danger we're called to live in. That's what we need to stand up in. That's the danger that we need to stand. The Matrix is just the world, and the world is just the attempt of humanity to find God without God.
Right.
And so our dangerous calling
they're turning their idols
to stand
to God.
in front of that.
And
to say no and point in the right direction, whether we get shot in the process or not.
And the polar opposite of that is that turning their idols, turning their gods into their God is a dangerous thing. So we need to combat that with us being as dangerous as them, with the sword that you talked about, with being meek, with being obedient with the Holy Spirit, with being submissive, with standing for the truth and the whole truth that you stand on based on what you read in Scripture. We have to, our voices need to be louder. And I think when we amplify our voices and we get together and stop being petty with one another, because that's another thing, like with Christians, sometimes we get into these civil wars and then people get shot with innocent bystanders get shot with friendly fire, if you will, right? So I think once we start being more of a unified church, we're going to start seeing more revival in every inch and corner of this country. And I think that we're going there. And I know that you say that we're in a dark place, but we have been in a dark place for 100 years.
Well, I want to touch on that. So we have that one thing I want to talk about is like we want to look at the state of humanity. It's like, and the state is chaos. And I heard it described. There's a really great book called The Right Side of History. Controversial author Ben Shapiro. really great book.
He's solid though. He's solid.
Really great book, and one of the things he describes Western civilization is a tight line over an ocean of chaos. And what he's talking about is like without Western civilization, all you have is the chaos. And he starts talking about what built that tight line, and the tight line is the fight for order. And he talks about it's the Judeo-Christian values. So it's the whole thing is like, and I would argue that at the forefront of Western civilization is the United States. And I would even say that those values have spread wealth, prosperity, freedom across the world. Is the world? Can we point out a bunch of broken things about the world?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we look at the world 100 years ago, we are far better than we were today than we were then.
Yeah.
And that is due to Western civilization influence, and I would even argue like due to Christian influence, because that's what built that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that we're always in that fight.
Yeah.
Like we never get to that place where we can rest. It's always the fight. The chaos is always at the back door trying to tear down what is good, what is orderly, what is righteous. So there's never really been a time in history where we didn't have that. There's always been barbarians at the gate. It's, are we strong enough on the inside to push back?
Yeah.
And
not be cowards and leave.
Right. And ultimately, like, I want to talk about, I think we're in a place right now where we can use words, we can use judgment, like, we can debate, we can change hearts and minds. Yeah. And I do believe that's only with the power of God. And I just say that, like, as an encouragement, like that, and that's not going to change, even if we push it back all the way to the edge. And it's, it's our job to bring up the next generation, because there's going to be barbarians at the gate. There's always going to be people and man who
it seems like
God.
History never repeats itself. It rhymes, right?
It rhymes.
Yeah, it rhymes.
And the Bible talks about this. The devil is like a roaring lion, prowling around, seeking whom he may devour. He's always going to be there. But the Bible says that the Lord gives his beloved sweet sleep. Okay, so this is the thing I want to touch on.
I hope you sleep very sweet tonight, beloved.
You're telling me, bro, because I'm about to have a baby in March. I have to sleep then. So John Eldredge, he recently came out with a book called Resilient, and a book before that was Get Your Life Back. He's the author of Wild at Heart and Father
I have that book, Wild at Heart.
Great book. Yeah, great book.
We actually had a book study on that years ago.
In Resilient, he talks about the collective PTSD of humanity because of COVID. And how, what it looks like to be resilient in the face of trauma, what it looks like to pause, to go before the Father
and reflect,
to dive deep into the soul and let Jesus in there.
Right.
And as a kingdom person, that's what we need to do. That's where the battle needs to happen. Yeah. What I often find myself is being tempted to fight the external so much that I get numb learning about all of the traumas, because I like firearms, right? And one of the caveats of liking firearms is because the laws are changing so often, because the ATF is stepping over so many of their own boundaries that they're supposed to be having. I don't know on a given day whether I'm a felon or not, unless I look at the news. And so, like, I'm tracking, okay, thank God there's an injunction on this one, because I bought that legally. And I don't want to have to pay an extortion tax and give up my left testicle so I can keep what I bought. So in that realm, I'm often tempted to be outraged by the overstepping of my perceived entitled rights.
Right, yeah.
And one thing that the Lord has been making it a point to bring to me is to bring me back to Him in a place where I disconnect, where I purposely disconnect from not for the sake of enjoyment and personal pleasure.
Andrew Tate will say that disconnect from the matrix.
Right, to disconnect from the matrix, but he's talking about it in the sense of power struggle.
Right.
I'm talking about it in the sense of spiritual health.
Health and serenity.
It's like you're being underwater and you can't breathe. You need an oxygen tank.
Right.
And if your oxygen tank isn't filled, if you're not connected to the air of the Holy Spirit, your lungs will collapse.
Right.
And so, yes, we're at a place where we have hope, but the only way that hope is going to flourish is if we get our heads out of the sand, stop being numb, and allow ourselves to feel the pain of what we've already experienced.
Yeah.
And let ourselves be renewed by the Holy Spirit, living different lives. We're called to be set apart from the world.
Yeah.
And that's going to have to, that means that we don't spend as much time on our phones. That means that we don't spend as much time in temptation. It means we're not going out partying. We're not, we're not going out fornicating. We are called to be different.
We're called to run to the fire and rescue people who are lost.
But how are you going to have that strength unless you train?
Right.
And so that's what...
Because the only thing that we are to flee from, the Bible says, is sexual immorality.
It's temptation.
But it seems like we're fleeing from the wrong things. Like some people are
fleeing from conflict.
From conflict. So it's like, America is going to hell in the handbasket. I'm moving to Sweden, like we spoke about earlier. I'm moving to Dubai, and I'm going to make my money and go to Dubai. And I've
heard and seen people transplant out of here because of the way they emotionally feel about this country. Because there's a lot of emotional attachment there too, and you're just led by emotion and your heart, and you just bypass perhaps what God has called you to do, right? If he's called you to be here, rooted here, and do things here, when things get rough, like you're not supposed to just flee out of fear.
I go back to that quote from Lord of the Rings.
So what would you say to that person that says or subscribes to that ideology that, oh my God, America sucks, it's going to hell in a handbasket, we got to get out of here? Like, what would you encourage that person that's struggling with that?
The whole point of America is personal responsibility.
Because Dana White, and I don't know if we have time to react to that video, but Dana White passionately, when he was on the
with choice words.
With choice words. So I don't know if I want to play it because it has some choice words on there. But he essentially said that, even here in America, domestically, people are subscribing to that ideology.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to give up, go. But the fact
that's exactly what he said. Like, if you don't like it, get
don't
out.
let the door hit you on the way out. Right. Like save me some taxes. But the fact of the matter is, America was built on personal responsibility. Yeah. And so if you, as Jordan Peterson says, if you don't try to change the world unless you first clean your room. Yeah. So I would encourage you, look at personal responsibilities in your day-to-day life. Learn to take those up. Yeah. Learn to take those up well without complaining. Yeah. And as those, and that's even something that I struggle with. Shoot, I didn't want to walk the dog today. Right. I was complaining about that.
It's just like one of the simplest tasks.
I was like, man, like, you just drop off.
I don't want to go to the gym today.
Mother-in-law's house. Like, I don't want to do that. Right. And I had to catch myself. Right. Learn to take up your responsibility because the nation that you live in is your responsibility. And if there's one thing that our society has given up, its responsibility. And if you want to be different, if you want to make a change, that only happens when you take responsibility. Amen. All the greatest heroes of every story ever known are those who decided to say, it's my responsibility.
Wow. Awesome. That is great. So in closing, because I know we're running out of time here, Doug, do you want to say something in closing of everything that we spoke about today?
I just want to think when we talk about the good fight, I think it's things like this. It's entering that space. Yeah. So I love what you're doing here. I get to be a part of it.
Thank you.
We need to enter that space, enter that realm. Obviously, we don't get consumed by it. Yeah. We need to be consumed in our church family, our community. Yeah. With 150 people. We can even make it smaller. That's where we're called. We're called to serve God, serve that community. Not to say that we don't build big pot farms. We do need to infiltrate that space. Yeah. So I love that this is happening. This is part of the good fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how we're going to save Western society. For ultimately, Christianity.
Yeah, because I believe that these types of kingdom. These types of dialogues, these types of conversations are seeds that we're throwing out there, and I do believe in rich soil. Yeah. Like there's rich soil out there. We're in a very blessed country. So metaphorically and literally we're casting out these seeds and on rich soil. And from whoever is listening that can spark that fire to start another dialogue within this context and educate themselves on how to vote and how to reach legislation and how to educate themselves.
Contact your senator.
Yeah, contact your senator. Write emails. Like these emails are actually available online. Believe it or not, you can email your senator. You can email your judge's assistant. You can I work in the courthouse. Like there's the 15th Judicial Circuit that we abide by in Palm Beach County. It's this 15th Judicial Circuit. We have these emails readily available for us to write emails as much as we can to infiltrate culture, society, and this state, region, wherever you're from, to make a change. Because if you're not going to be the change, you're not going to see the change in your sphere. So that's my encouragement. For those who are listening and watching, I hope that you took something out of this and encouraged you to share, like, and subscribe to this, because this is us literally contextualizing the scriptures and Bible to these secular political conversations, because we do believe that us unified as a church, as the Big C Church, can be the change for this nation. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming through. I love you guys.
Love you too.
As you already know, you guys are no strangers here. You're more than welcome to come back and we can chop it up and talk about other things.
Honored to be here.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So for those that are new to the show, please don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, and do all that good stuff on all social media platforms where you can listen to your podcast. Till next time, guys. Peace.